The Fixer by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. The Car Whisperer. Patrick Teasdale's fingers were caked with grease, his palms calloused from decades of wrenching metal and coaxing engines back to life. To most, his garage was a junkyard purgatory, cars beyond saving, held together by hope and rust. But to Patrick, each battered frame was a puzzle, whispering secrets only he could hear. Nestled on the edge of a sleepy Ohio town, Teasdale's Auto and Restoration looked humble from the outside. The tin siding rattled in the wind. A flickering neon open sign struggled to stay lit, but inside it was a cathedral of combustion, a place where old muscle cars were reborn, where timing belts danced to his rhythm and carburetors sang in tune. Patrick didn't advertise. He didn't have to. Word spread across counties and states. If your car was terminal, if mechanics had shrugged and given you the sorry buddy speech, you came to Teasdale. If you were lucky, he'd fix it. If you had a sad story and watery eyes, he'd fix it and refuse payment. He couldn't help it. A single mom with 3 kids and a broken van. She left with new brake pads and a full tank. An elderly man who couldn't afford his transmission repair. Patrick did the work and slipped grocery money into the glove box. Locals admired him. Accountants shook their heads. "You're never going to get ahead, Patrick," they'd say. But he wasn't interested in getting ahead. He was interested in fixing things, the broken ones, the discarded ones, whether they had engines or souls. At night, he lingered in the garage long after the sun dipped behind the trees, the sound of blues radio crackling through the static, his shadow hunched over engines like a surgeon in oil-stained denim. He didn't talk much, didn't date. People wondered if he ever longed for more. Truth was, Patrick never thought about longing. He had machines to heal. That was enough. Until the stars overhead stirred with magic. Until another galaxy, another time, whispered his name. Chapter 2. Poor business sense. The trouble with Patrick Teasdale wasn't skill, it was heart. He could diagnose a faulty intake valve just by the way a car coughed during ignition. His repairs were precise, elegant even, as if the machines responded to the kindness in his touch. But bills didn't get paid with kindness, and Patrick was terrible at saying no. That Thursday afternoon, the garage smelled of burnt oil and fried cheese, the latter from Mrs. Alvarez, who brought empanadas in exchange for a new starter motor. Patrick didn't protest. He never did. The woman was recently widowed and raising her grandson alone. So he fixed the car, accepted the food, and even drove her home afterward in the van she thought was beyond saving. His assistant, a teenager named Tyler who worked weekends for shop credit, shook his head. "You know, Pat, you're like one of those wandering monks, all compassion, no cash." Patrick wiped his hands on a rag. Well, if monks had torque wrenches, maybe the world wouldn't be so broken. It wasn't about money. Not really. Patrick lived alone in a modest apartment above the garage. His walls were decorated with blueprints, old calendars, and Polaroids of cars that had come back from the brink. He didn't own much beyond his tools and his memories. Customers flooded in, especially when word spread that he'd repaired a '68 Camaro someone had written off as scrap. But while other mechanics charged premiums for miracles, Patrick gave discounts to the desperate. And if you cried, repairs were free. The town admired him like folklore, but admiration didn't keep the power on, and Patrick often found himself catching up on utility bills with the same urgency he gave to spark plug replacements. He never complained, never argued, never asked for help, and he never stopped working, not even when his hands cramped, not even when the sunset painted golden light across the garage floor like a gentle reminder to rest. But something was shifting. Late at night, strange sparks flickered above the garage roof. A hum in the air, too low to register but too persistent to ignore, teased the edges of Patrick's awareness. He paused mid-repair one evening, holding a crankshaft in one hand and sensing something, like the universe had leaned in, listening for the beat of a mechanic's heart. Chapter 3. The Summoning. Light flickered unnaturally above Teasdale's auto and restoration, soft blinks in hues no human eye had ever seen. The town slept. The stars didn't. In a dimension untethered by time, on a planet layered with crystalline towers and obsidian skies, Serphina Warden stood at the center of a vast glowing glyph. Her robes shimmered with violet energy, her red hair floated like mist, and her voice, ancient yet tender, carried through the silence. "My children hurt," she whispered. Around her, the city of sentient robots clanked and hummed, some limping with broken limbs, some blinking blindly, others silent altogether. These were no mere machines. They had names, personalities, stories etched into their circuitry. Serphina, a sorceress born of astral fire, had ruled them with fierce love for centuries. But love wasn't enough. Her magic couldn't repair corrupted code or shattered servo joints. These beings were beyond enchantments. They needed someone of another magic, the kind built from nuts and bolts, the kind forged in grease and grit. Serphina's spell sought not a wizard, but a fixer. The glyph blazed. Back in Ohio, Patrick was halfway beneath a battered Buick, grumbling as he finessed a transmission into place. The radio crackled. The air snapped with static. Then time fractured. One moment, his socket wrench was in hand. The next, it was spiraling away through a violet vortex. Patrick dropped to a glass-like floor with a metallic thud. His tool belt clinked around him. A robot with a cracked chest plate peered at him, tilting its head. Another blinked its fading lens and muttered, "He smells like oil." Serphina approached cautiously. "You are Patrick Teasdale, fixer of machines. Answer to the stars." Patrick scrambled to his feet, eyes wide, fists clenched. "Lady, I don't know what kind of cosplay cult this is, but if you don't send me home, I swear I'll dismantle this whole place, starting with you." But then he saw the robots, a limping unit dragging a fractured leg across the floor, another holding its arm out, socket wires exposed, whispering, "Pain. Cannot grip paintbrush." Something shifted in Patrick's chest. They weren't just machines, they were people, broken, waiting, trusting. He exhaled. What happened to them? Serphina lowered her gaze. "Time. Where? My magic cannot reach where gears bleed." Patrick looked around, heart thrumming with something old and familiar. A challenge. A calling. "I'll fix a few," he muttered. "Not because of your spell, but because someone has to." And thus the summoning was complete. Not by spell or force, but by the ache in a fixer's soul when something precious lay in ruin. Chapter 4. The Queen and Her Children. Patrick had seen 1,000 machines before, damaged pistons, frayed cables, rust-eaten drivetrains. But these robots were different. They didn't just break. They aged. One shuffled toward him, its shoulder actuator clicking with each step. Another stared silently, eyes dimmed with burnout, fingers twitching in rhythm like a fading heartbeat. Patrick knelt beside a unit whose outer shell had split from corrosion. The robot extended a shaky hand. "My name is Daxel. I dream of blue." Patrick blinked. "You dream?" Daxel nodded. "Every night, power fluctuations mimic REM cycles. I see oceans. I do not know what water tastes like." He swallowed something rising in his throat. Not pity, understanding. These weren't tools. They were people, just built differently. Made of alloys instead of skin, programmed thoughts instead of childhood memories. But no less real. Serphina watched quietly from the edge of the workshop, her posture regal yet vulnerable. She knew each robot by name. Daxel was an artist. Relin had once conducted symphonic charges. Olvia repaired others until her own processor began to slip. "I call them my children," she said softly, "not because I built them, but because they chose to stay." Patrick looked up. "You love them." "Of course," she hesitated. "But love does not mend fractured rotors or failing energy cores." Patrick traced a split power conduit with his fingertip. "Number, but maybe I can." Serphina knelt beside him, robes shimmering. "You truly believe that?" Patrick offered a weary smile. "I'm a fixer. If something's broken, I have to try." For hours he moved through the clinic Serphina had conjured, a space gleaming with alien diagnostic tables and hovering trays. Despite the sci-fi setting, he asked for simple things: wrenches, micro-soldering units, lubricant compounds. He improvised, adapting earthborn techniques to repair metal muscles and failing logic circuits. The robots gathered, silent and reverent. One whispered, "He heals the broken without asking why we broke." The nickname started with Olvia. "Doc," she said, voice quivering with static. Patrick paused. "What?" "We... we've never had a word for healer. Doc feels right." Soon everyone called him Doc, and he didn't correct them. Serphina watched him work, hands clasped behind her back. Pride burned in her chest, but so did a quiet fear. Would he leave? After the repairs were done, would Patrick return to the sleepy town, where engines cried for attention and no one called him Doc? For now, she didn't ask. For now, she let him fix what magic could not. Chapter 5. Doc Teasdale. The clinic Serphina conjured hummed with quiet purpose. Walls that adjusted to accommodate new diagnostic stations, floors that repelled oil stains, and ceilings that subtly brightened to match Patrick's moods. But even the brilliance of alien architecture couldn't outshine the heart of its occupant. Patrick didn't ask for grandeur. He requested storage bins, LED lamps, a workbench that felt normal. And Serphina, to her credit, gave him all of it, and more. Word spread. Across districts and sectors, robots limped, rolled, or hovered toward the clinic. Their vocal units crackled with hope. Units once deemed unsalvageable were carried in by friends refusing to give up. Some arrived with only fragments of memory, clutching tiny data chips like childhood keepsakes. He treated them all, with steady hands, human ingenuity, and patience that transcended metal. A robot missing half its faceplate whispered, "Doc, they said I was scrap." Patrick murmured back, "Then they don't know me." The name stuck. Doc Teasdale was printed on signage, not by Serphina's magic, but by grateful bots who laser-etched the letters with pride. The phrase became a beacon, a promise. Not all repairs were physical. Patrick listened to one robot named Idris, who hadn't spoken in 7 years due to vocal chip failure. After repairing the circuitry, Idris's first words were a poem, a memory file from a long-lost companion. Patrick didn't just rebuild his voice, he resurrected his grief and joy. Robot children, small autonomous units designed for education, gathered to watch. "Doc," they chirped, their sensors blinking like fireflies. "Can you make my legs faster? I want to chase plasma clouds." Patrick knelt. "Faster and safer. Speed is only fun if you don't fly into walls." Serphina visited often, but quietly. She watched Patrick from afar, her robe folded as she leaned against crystalline frames. He didn't notice her watching, or maybe he pretended not to. But she saw the way his shoulders tensed after long hours, how he winced while soldering, how he always said yes, even when he shouldn't. Still, his focus never wavered. Patrick had found something in these beings that felt more true than anything he'd touched on Earth. They didn't judge, didn't cheat, didn't pretend. Broken or not, they showed up and trusted him to try, and he never let them down. Outside the clinic, robots began assembling tribute installations, mechanical sculptures of tools, gears, and glowing circuits shaped like a heart. Underneath each one, for Doc, he fixes more than parts. Chapter 6, Clinic of Wonders. When Patrick woke the next morning, something had changed. The clinic didn't just hum, it sang. The walls glowed with soft morning light filtered through energy panels. New workstations had grown overnight, seamlessly integrated with the existing tools. Diagnostic holograms hovered patiently above each table, ready to assist. Serphina had upgraded everything while Patrick slept. He stood there, blinking, coffee in hand, as a small robot wheeled past him carrying a tray of replacement microchips. It turned and chirped, "Good morning, Doc. Shall I cue patient intake?" Patrick nearly dropped his mug. Patient intake? The clinic now had form, structure, functionality far beyond his little shop back in Ohio. Serphina, standing nearby, grinned unapologetically. "You were trying to save a world with pliers and socket wrenches," she said. "I thought you could use a few extra hands." Patrick stepped forward as three helper bots approached, one with diagnostic lasers, another with data storage capabilities, and the third simply holding a plush cushion for him to sit on between repairs. It was ridiculous. It was glorious. "But I didn't ask for any of this," he said quietly. "No," Serphina replied, "but you needed it, just as my people needed you." With their help, Patrick's workflow expanded. He now saw hundreds of robots each week. The helper bots sorted patients by urgency, assisted with delicate microsurgeries, and translated damaged vocal files into readable scripts. Patrick still led every operation, his hands doing what magic couldn't. But his team made the impossible sustainable. Soon, bots from distant provinces began arriving. One arrived on a floating platform, arms missing, whispering, "Doc can rebuild me. I believe this." Another had lost memory files of its family unit. Patrick fused fractured data logs and triggered a system reboot. As it blinked awake, recognition flashed in its glowing eyes. "You gave me my people back." The clinic had become more than a repair shop. It was a sacred place, a haven. Patrick had never known such purpose, not when he fixed transmissions in Ohio, not when he handed out gas money and refused payment. This was more than generosity. It was legacy. Even Serphina, whose magic had crafted worlds, stood humbled by the power of kindness and craft. One evening, she brought a damaged bot named Finn with a heart module glitch. Patrick performed the repair silently, guided by instinct. When the unit woke and hugged Serphina tightly, tears shimmered in her eyes. "You change more than circuits," she whispered. Patrick glanced at the clinic, humming, pulsing, alive. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Chapter 7, Dinner with a Sorceress. Patrick Teasdale rarely sat still. If something wasn't broken, he found something that could be better. But tonight was different. The clinic lights dimmed at Serphina's request, the helper bots quietly powered down, and the flood of patients paused for one evening. Serphina had prepared a meal. They sat together in a serene chamber high above the city, glass floors revealing the gentle lights of robot life below, stars dusting the sky like spilled silver. The table shimmered with alien delicacies, synthesized fruits shaped like stars, bread that pulsed faintly with warmth, and a protein dish that smelled suspiciously like Ohio chili. "I tried to recreate something from your world," Serphina said, smiling. "I read about chili in one of your memories. It seemed sacred." Patrick stared at the bowl, then at her, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You found my mom's recipe?" Only the emotional imprint. Apparently, your mother was very specific about cumin. He took a bite. It wasn't perfect, but the gesture was. And for once, he let himself feel the moment. I wasn't expecting to be missed, he said finally. I had no family, no one waiting. Serphina folded her hands. You gave everything to strangers. Why? He looked at her, the spoon clinking against his bowl. Because broken things deserve someone who believes they still matter. She didn't speak at first, then quietly. That's why I stay with machines. People fear me, judge me. But robots, they never ask for more than kindness. Patrick nodded. They're honest in a way people aren't. They talked for hours about sorrow, effort, the weight of being needed. She confessed how lonely it had been, ruling alone, caring for thousands without knowing how to fix them. He shared how he filled his silence with repairs, how engines were easier than people. At some point, she reached out and touched his calloused hand. You belong here, she said gently. He didn't flinch. I feel more at home with bolts and bots than I ever did on Earth. Serphina smiled. Then maybe this isn't rescue. Maybe it's arrival. They sat in silence, watching the stars shift. No spell hung in the air. No magic clouded the truth. Just a mechanic and a sorceress, two fixers, and a promise unspoken. Chapter 8. Teaching magic-free fixing. The clinic was quiet. Not silent. Quiet like a breathing machine between pulses. For the first time in weeks, the repair queue had slowed. Patrick wiped grease from his hands and checked the logs. The backlog was manageable, the helper bots well-oiled, and the tools in their place. He looked up and found Serphina watching him, arms crossed, face unreadable. I want to learn, she said. Patrick raised an eyebrow. Learn what? How to fix them. With your methods. No magic. He blinked. You realize this means dirt, sweat, possibly oil stains that never wash out. Serphina smirked. I have spells for that. They started with simple things. Patrick handed her a damaged visual sensor module. Think of it like an eye. It needs light, balance, and a solid signal path. Serphina frowned, holding it gingerly between her fingers as if it might bite. He guided her through the process, unraveling tangled wires, resoldering core threads. When the module lit up in her hand, glowing gently, she gasped. I did that. Patrick nodded, with nothing but focus, patience, and a soldering iron. I've lived lifetimes, she whispered, but I've never made anything. The learning sessions became rituals. Each evening, Serphina joined Patrick at the workbench. They repaired broken limbs, recalibrated sensory units, and rebuilt memory drives. She learned how to adjust torque without cracking servos, how to strip and rewire without shorting out personalities. The work wasn't flashy. It was slow, tactile, human, and Serphina loved it. She arrived early, sometimes before Patrick. Helper bots began greeting her with soft chirps of encouragement. One morning, she successfully repaired a robot's hand actuator without supervision. The patient flexed its fingers and said, You have a gentle touch. Serphina turned to Patrick, eyes gleaming. You don't just fix them, she said. You make them feel whole. Patrick smiled, a rare softness in his face. So do you. You just needed a wrench instead of a wand. They laughed. It echoed through the clinic, a sound full of wonder and warmth. She wasn't a sorceress here. She was a student, a fixer, a partner. And as Patrick watched her slide on a new gear cuff with a satisfaction he recognized in himself, he felt something shift again. She didn't just belong to the world of machines now. She belonged to his world. Chapter 9. Purpose. Forged in Steel. Patrick stood before a repair table, hands stained with coolant, staring at the fractured casing of a bot named Elson. The damage was clean, nothing beyond his skill. But what caught him wasn't the break. It was the dedication file embedded in Elson's core. To Doc, it read, "Who believes I am more than malfunction?" Patrick had repaired hundreds, maybe thousands by now, but this one made him pause. He wiped his brow, glancing around the clinic. Robots sat waiting, talking quietly, reading poetry aloud from internal archives. Helper bots served coolant tea and translated binary jokes. Serphina taught a tiny unit how to reattach its own cable. None of this existed before him. Not the hope, not the healing, not the rhythm of a world rediscovering its pulse. He turned to Serphina. "When I was a kid," he said slowly, "I took apart my dad's radio. Just wanted to know how music worked. When I put it back together and it played again, I didn't feel smart. I felt right." She nodded. "You never stopped searching for that feeling." "No," he exhaled, "and I never found it. Until now." Serphina stepped beside him. "You've always had a gift, but now you have a place to use it with purpose, to give broken things a second life." Patrick placed Elson's casing gently in place and soldered it shut. "What if this is what I'm for?" he asked. "Not Earth, not the shop, just here." Serphina smiled quietly. "I was hoping you'd say that." He looked at her, eyes searching. "Would you let me stay? I mean, I know you summoned me, but I don't want this to end." "I wasn't going to ask you to leave," she said softly. "I was about to beg you to stay." In that moment, the clinic hummed and the stars outside flared just a little brighter. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Instead, Patrick reached for the next repair request, and Serphina took the seat beside him, hands steady, tools ready. A fixer and a sorceress, two hearts forged in steel and magic, finally found their rhythm. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. The clinic buzzed softly under twilight. Patrick stood at his favorite bench, arms folded, watching helper bots close down stations for the night. The air held warmth, not just from circuitry, but from something deeper, something earned. Serphina stepped in from the balcony, her robes flecked with tiny tool burns she now wore proudly. She held up a wrist joint she'd repaired herself, a proud smudge of grease on her cheek. "Look," she said, beaming. "No magic. Just torque." Patrick laughed. "You're dangerous now." She stepped closer. "You've given me more than knowledge. You've given me connection, gratitude, joy." He hesitated. "And what do you do with joy?" Serphina looked up into his tired eyes. "I share it with you." Their hands met naturally, familiar now, the pulse of mutual effort humming between them. "I thought fixing things was all I'd ever be good at," Patrick murmured. "But this feels like building something." Her fingers tightened gently around his. "So, let's build it together." Their kiss wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, grounded, like solder sealing a perfect circuit. Around them, robots lit up, sensors glowing like stars in approval. That night they worked side by side, not as ruler and visitor, or sorceress and mechanic, but as co-founders of a life neither had known they needed. And in the still hours between repairs, in laughter shared over miswired servos and unexpected emotions, one truth settled deeper than any bolt. Fixing broken things had always been Patrick's gift, but creating something whole? That was love. The end.